What's up guys, it's the new sensation, Bigger Notation here, and it's been a little while since I've done one of these, but we are back with a deck profile, hopefully on some more consistent deck profiles for the future as well. But this is a deck that I've been enjoying a lot recently, probably my favourite deck from the new Zenkai set, because if you know me, you know I love a good gimmick, and Black has been bringing the gimmicks fairly recently, and that is Shroom Salsa. Shroom Salsa just has everything I look for. It's got a nice little gimmick with the playing things from Warp and the interesting Servant and Overlord mechanics. And it's also got the ability to play during both players' turns, which is something that I love when it comes to Dragon Ball, and it's what I look for in all of the decks that I play, because you have the ability to play the guys from Warp during either player's turn, because it's all activate battle stuff. And along with that, with most of the other Zenkai stuff now, we're just getting the ability to free combo, which is obviously great for charging up Z energy for the deck. Sadly, Black really didn't get much love with the newest Zenkai set. We only got one Z battle card specific to Black, and also the Z leader that goes with this deck. So hopefully we get a few more, because I feel like this deck could actually have some pretty good competitive potential if we got some decent Black Z stuff. Especially if it was obviously specifically to support this deck. But the deck I feel like is definitely underrated. It's not going to be taking any events anytime soon, I don't think, but it's definitely slept on. It's not a bad rogue pick. It definitely does well, especially into those slower decks against blue. It just really takes people by surprise, and it has some really strong hand control aspects to it, which definitely helps against blue. But we'll stop the ramblings, we'll get straight into the deck, and because it's a new deck, a new Zenkai deck, then I'll try and explain the cards as I go a little bit, because I know not everyone is going to be accustomed to all the new stuff. But for the front side of the leader we have Shroom Salsa. Very simple. When it swings, you warp the top 2 cards of your deck, and then if you warp the top 2, then you search top 5 for a Black Demon Realm Race or Demon God, and you add it to your hand. And then you can awaken when your life is at 4 or less, or if you have 6 or more black cards in your warp. And the awaken is very weird. Let me just read it to make sure that I've got it perfectly correct. So you send a card from your hand to the warp, then draw 2 cards, switch up to one of your energy to active mode, and then go down to 6 life. So in essence, it's kind of like a draw 1, untap 1 awaken, because you go net 0 with, or you go net +1 with the draw 2 and then warp a card from your hand. But because you want a lot of your cards in your warp, it feels a lot better than that, because you get to set up your warp, which kind of effectively stays in your hand, and then you get to draw 2 on the awaken and untap 1. So it does feel a bit like a draw 2 untap 1 awaken, which is amazing, and it just goes well with the blue BOUJACK that I obviously love so dearly, and the yellow Sin Shenron. For the backside, the leader gains this really frustrating permanent, which is if a card would go from your combo area to the drop, it gets removed from game instead. So it makes it really hard to actually fuel Overrealm for this deck, which is why for a black deck we're running very few Overrealms. And it means that a lot of the skill when it comes to being on the backside of the leader comes from being able to sequence properly in charging the cards that you combo with to Z energy if possible, and then dropping off Z energy to play a Z card. Then the Z energy goes to drop, and then you can Overrealm, put the cards that you charged to Z energy back in the warp, and then you can play them from warp again. So you kind of cycle between those like 4 different steps. And I feel like that's a big part of this deck, is being able to efficiently cycle through each of those 4 steps as and when you can, based on the tempo of the match. And then your attack auto becomes, when you attack, you warp a Demon Realm Race or Demon God from your hand to draw 2 cards, which is great, setting up your warp much more efficiently rather than the random top 2 from the top of the deck with the front side. And then it gets a great activate battle, which is if this card specifically is in battle, you can combo with a Demon Realm Race or Demon God from your warp that doesn't have super combo, and as long as it's black as well. So that is how you're going to be charging your Z energy most of the time. You can do that on offense and defense, and it also sets up some of your plays from warp, which we'll see later in the deck. But overall, a very nice leader, and I've kind of built this deck in a way to try and capitalize on the activate battle specifically as a defense tool. There are some times where you'll be going more aggressive, especially against a deck like, or a color like blue, but I feel like the meta right now is quite aggressive, so you want to be defending quite a lot, and so I've built the deck to really just try and defend against the meta. Try and grind down into a really simplified game state where you can comfortably be on 2 life to Z Awaken, because your Z leader needs you to be at 2 less life, and then you can use your free combos to just survive everything, because you've just reached that simplified game state where neither of you really has much in hand to combo with, so you can really just abuse the activate battles to survive. So that's the idea behind this deck anyways. To start things off, we have our Self-Awakeners, I guess. We have the 4 Mechikaburas, so he is a 1-drop Overlord with once per turn. So basically, if this guy sticks around, then you don't need to worry about sequencing Overlord stuff for the rest of the game, but most of the time this guy dies very early on. But if he does stick around, then it's just amazing for you, it just makes the game easier. When he's played, you draw a card, and then you can additionally warp the top 2 cards of your deck, or up to the top 2. So you want to be doing that early on, especially to fuel your Awaken. You can easily Awaken turn 2 pretty much every game with this deck, because you get 1 or 2, well, you get 2 or 4 cards warped from the front side of your leader, depending on whether you went first or second, and then each 1-drop also warps the top 2. So we've got the 1-drop Meki here. He's also got an activate main where you can pay 3 and check the bottom card of your deck, and if it's a servant battle card, then you can play it. And if not, then it goes back to the bottom of the deck. That rarely ever comes up, because the only time where you'd use that is if you have the 8-drop on the bottom of your deck, and you can play the 8-drop from your warp for 2 energy rather than the 3. So it only really comes up against those really slow matchups where you're cycling a lot of 8-drops and you maybe play 2 in a turn, because the activate battle to play it from warp is limit 1. So if you want to play a second one, you would have to use the activate main here. But yeah, you basically never use that effect unless you're in a really dire situation. Then for the other 1-drops, we've got 4 Demon God Salsa. Auto on play, you search top 5 for a black Demon Realm Race or Demon God, and then warp the top up to the top 2. So effectively the same as your leader's front side search, except the warping is optional, and the search happens before the warp rather than after. This card has also a really nice auto where limit 1, when it's comboed from the warp, it gets plus 1k combo power, so it becomes a 6k, which again ties into that defense strategy that we were talking about earlier, where you can combo this and it effectively acts as a 10k combo from warp for your leader's activate battle, which is very nice. And it also, because it's a Demon God Salsa, it facilitates some of your plays from warp, which we'll be getting into in a second. Then I run 2 Demon God Shroom. This is definitely the worst of the early 1-drops in my opinion. So it's a 2-drop, but it becomes a 1-drop if you have 2 or more black cards in your warp and your leader is a Demon Realm Race. So basically from turn 1 if you went second, or turn 2 if you went first, this guy's a 1-drop. And when he swings, limit 1, you draw a card, then warp up to the top 2 cards of your deck. So it's just nice to have him as another copy of 9 and 10 of your 1-drops that can help you self-awaken. And it's also another Shroom name, which we do sort of lack in this deck. There are more Salsas than Shrooms. And it is sometimes frustrating because the Salsa that you play from warp is most of the time better than the Shroom. But this guy's just not, like, he's never going to stick around on board, and he needs to swing to get his effect, and he's also 10k, so once your opponent's awakened, then he's pretty much useless. At least the other 1-drops have better utility. This 1-drop Salsa searches top 5, which is most of the time better than drawing 1, and it also has the extra effect when it's comboed from warp, and then the Meki is the Overlord, and it has the activate main, which will occasionally come up. But basically they're just here to add extra Shroom names and extra Self-Awakeners to the deck. So that's the 1-drop lineup. And then for the actual threats of the deck, we have 4 of the Demon God Salsa Stormclad. So it's a 3-drop Servant, activate battle. If you have a Shroom in your warp or in your combo area, then you can pay 1, warp a card from your hand, and then play this guy from your hand or warp. And you can't warp the copy of the card that you're trying to play from your hand if you're trying to play it from your hand, but you can warp copies of itself from your hand if you're playing it from your warp. It's just to stop you going, I've got a Shroom in my combo area, I've got this guy in my hand, I pay 1, I warp it from hand, and then I play it from warp, because then you obviously wouldn't lose the card in your hand. And then when it's played, you can optionally warp the top card of your deck, and then regardless of whether you do or not, your opponent warps a card from their hand on limit 1. So this is where the hand control really comes in, and I've tried to gear this deck towards a more hand control-y deck to try and put opponents into that simplified game state that we talked about earlier. And I feel like that's the most efficient way to do that, to be honest. And then just because this guy's a 10k servant, he can swing 20k and get a little bit of a threat in, nice chip damage. Nothing massive, and because he's servant he won't restand, so you do have to cycle your overlords quite consistently with this deck, which can become one of the problems that this deck suffers from. But overall this card is just basically the best card in the deck, I'd say. Just being able to bring it out on your turn and then bring it out during your opponent's turn, because even though the autos limit 1, it counts as 2 different turns, and then forcing them to warp 2 cards from their hand for 2 energy, and you get 2 20k bodies that can then trigger Overlord. Very, very strong stuff. And you can obviously facilitate all of this off of your activate battle of your leader because you combo from warp. Then we have the counterpart, we have the 4 Shrooms. So this card, again, 10k servant 3-drop, plays itself for 1 from your warp if you have a Salsa in your combo area. So these guys need their alternating selves in the combo area to play them from warp. And then this guy is auto limit 1 when he attacks. You can warp a 4 cost or less from your opponent's board. So significantly worse than the Salsa, it needs to attack to get the effect off, which means against yellow, this card is just never resolving. And against, well, against any sort of counterplay like Charismatic or Yamcha, well, Yamcha not so much because it's 20k, but potentially Videl, this card just doesn't resolve, whereas Salsa would, which is why this card is much worse than the Salsa, and it also only warps 4 drops or less, which isn't super relevant, but this deck can lack removal without the Shroom coming down, so sometimes it's just a necessary card to play. The frustrating part about this card is that because it's a servant to counterpart with the Salsa part, you only ever get the effect once because it's never restanding. So you can swing with it, even if it sticks about for your next turn, it's not restanding because it's servant, which feels kind of bad, but that's just the way it is, I guess. Then we have 4 of the boss monster, Demon God, Shroom, and Salsa. 25k double strike servant, so 35k double strike, really, really strong power levels and keywords, I guess. The frustrating part about this card is it doesn't have deflect or barrier, so for a boss monster it doesn't have much protection, but it does play itself for 2 from your warp, which is very nice, and it doesn't cost you a card in your hand like the 3-drops do. However, it only plays itself for 2 if you have 3 or more energy and 2 black cards in your combo area. So it doesn't necessarily require a Shroom and a Salsa, or Shroom and Salsa like the other guys do. But it does require you to have 2 cards, which means unless you're Z-Awakened, you're going to be losing at least 1 card from your hand or board to combo to get this guy off. And then when it's played, your opponent chooses 1 card on their board, 1 battle card on their board, and 1 card in their hand, ignoring barrier, and warps them. So slightly frustrating, your opponent chooses the cards that they lose. It would have been nice if you could have at least chosen the battle card, but it does provide some fairly decent barrier removal if you can get them down to 1 card on board so they have to choose their barrier card. Or if their entire board is barrier threats, then you can at least clear 1 even if your opponent chooses. The main utility of this card is the fact that it's 35k double strike pressure, and it's also a 1 cost 10k that is both the Shroom and Salsa, so when you combo it from warp, it takes your leader to 25k, and you can play both the 3-drops from your warp, which is very, very helpful. He also has a permanent where if he would be removed from combo area and sent to the drop, I think, he just goes to the bottom of the deck instead. So basically, at the end of the combo, he goes to the bottom of the deck, which can set up your 1-drop Meki Kabura activate main, which is sometimes nice, but most of the time you're just Z-charging it so that you can eventually cycle it back into the warp again. And then for the last Shroom and Salsa card, we have 2 of the Champ Pack card, Shroom and Salsa Team of Terror. This card doesn't have any effects, you don't need to read any of it. It's just another Shroom and Salsa name because it's both the characters, again, like the 8-drop, so you can combo it from warp and get both the guys out from warp. And most of the time that's going to be your ideal turn 2 play, is to have played 1 or 2 1-drops, swing with your leader, awaken, combo this from warp with the activate battle, and then play both the 3-drops out. Yeah, you never ever get the effects of this guy off because they're just too situational or too expensive. And then for some of the other support cards, we run 4 of the Meki Kabura. Originally, I was playing this card at 3, and then I realized it was pretty much the best card in the deck in terms of flexibility. Because a big issue with this deck is that if you negate the leader swing when you're playing against this deck, then the entire deck starts to crumble a little bit because they then can't get their free combo, they can't play their battle cards from warp. So they either have to invest a card from their hand, take another line of play, which is generally going to be less efficient, or they have to pass turn, and then when you swing at their leader, they'll play all their stuff. But then obviously they don't have autonomy with the swings, and you can have the opportunity to kill their board before they can even do anything with it. So this card really fixes that issue. Plays itself for 1 if you have 6 or more black cards in your warp. Has an Overlord skill as well. So if your 1-drop doesn't stick about, you can just play this guy down and get the Overlord off, which is great. And when it swings, you combo with a guy from your warp. Guy being a Demon Realm Race or Demon God without super combo. So basically, if they negate your leader swing, you can play this guy, and now they have to negate this guy's swing as well, or you're just going to be able to play all your stuff anyways. So that's the main utility of that guy, really. Then for the Overrealms, I'm on 3 Relentless Destruction Mirror and 3 Dark Broly. So the Mirror obviously leaning harder into that hand control game plan, trying to get to that simplified game state where your Z leader can just carry you. Overrealm 3 is really massive in this deck because your Demigra Z battle card costs 3 Z energy, so you can play the Demigra and then instantly Overrealm 3, and then trigger the Demigra and get your guys back in the warp, which is huge. And then the Overrealm 6, this is more of a finisher after you've Z awakened. There will be a lot of games where you Z awaken and you have 1 turn to kill them because you've just managed to live on 2 or 1 life because of your defense, but then it's unlikely that you'll survive past that turn. So this is kind of your finisher play there. Obviously it's not as good as a card like Feigned Greeting might be in a situation where you have to kill them on that turn. But the utility of the Dark Broly is that obviously you can play it from warp in this deck, and that's going to be massive when you're warping random cards from the top of the deck early on. Warping this guy over a copy of Feigned Greeting or any other big Overrealm is just better, because it means that in situations where they negate your leader swing and you either don't have the Meki or you can't afford to play it in the situation, you can just slam this guy down from your warp and at least take out a threat from your opponent's board. And this is like the only unrestricted removal that the deck has, because the Shroom only warps 4 costs or less, and the big 8-drop lets your opponent choose. So this is kind of necessary just to clear boards sometimes. The super combos of choice that I've gone for have been the 4 Vegeta super combos. Yes, the Salsa super combo that came out in the set is searchable off of the leader and the 1-drop Salsa. I just don't think it's worth running it, because you can't combo with the Salsa from warp. So if you warp the super combos early on, it's still a loss of a super combo. And the other reason is that this guy sets up your servant plays. So when you're Z awakened, you can, if you don't know what the bottom card of your deck is, you can super combo and then put a servant to the bottom of your deck. Or if you want to use the Meki Kabura 1-drop as well, you can super combo, put 8 drops at the bottom of your deck. So this is really nice in terms of setting that up. And also the deck just draws enough to be able to find your super combos, because it just cycles naturally quite a lot with the leader awaken. So you don't really need the searchability of the Salsa super combos in most games. So I find that this is just better in most cases. Secret rare of choice, I'm running Kai. This is because I don't own Pan. Probably worth running Pan. I tried running the Boo counter, it's just too expensive for the deck. The deck is very, very energy choked. So you need Pan as an extra defense or an extra swing. Most of the time I find that I'm 1 swing off killing people, and I have this card in hand and I'm tapped out, and if I just had Pan, I won the game there. So definitely run Pan. It also provides extra defense if you want to get to that simplified game state, which we've talked about. Main finisher of the deck, if you're not just overwhelming people with value, is the Dark Masked King. Just comes up sometimes where it's really, really strong. You warp a lot of your opponent's stuff, like you'll be surprised, because you'll be cycling Salsas as much as you can, and then occasionally you'll play a Shroom or an 8-drop, and that's like 1 or 2 cards into the warp again. So this guy is really easy to get off on turn 4, and like I said, there are some games where you'll just Z awaken turn 3 or turn 4, and then you have to drop this guy with like an Overrealm and try and just kill them on turn 4 or 5. And he carries. He comes up a lot. He's very, very strong. Then for defensive cards, I'm running 3 support. I was trying this at 4, and it honestly didn't feel that bad. But I've gone back down to 3 just to try and mess around with some other cards to help with different matchups. To maybe deal with some slower matchups a little bit better. But you could honestly try 4 and just lean all into that going into the simplified game state. A big utility of this card is as an extra card, so it actually gets around your leader permanent of being able to set up your drop. A lot of the times I'll find I might have like 1 or 2 cards in drop, and I'll just burn a support to get another card in my drop so I can overwhelm 3 into mirror and get another swing, or get my drop back into my warp again. Then for other defensive cards, we're running 2 Kai negates. This does feel like the weakest card in the deck at times, but I feel like it's a necessary evil to run. There are just times where you'll drop it and it will carry you a ton, and that can be massive in this deck, honestly. I am also running 3 of the Guardian of Spacetime Kai. Again, I was running this at 4, but I cut 1 of this and 1 of the support for the 2 copies of the next card you're about to see. This card I have conflictions about. It's really, really nice into Red Sin, because the way that you deal with Red Sin, especially with the red-yellow variant running around that has the counter, the way that you deal with that is either by stopping the 8-drop Sin attacking in some way that isn't a counter, things like Dirty Burst preemptively and then negating the attack, or using Final Flash to stop the triple strike crit. The only other way to deal with it is to combo out, and so decks that are efficient at comboing, like Blue BOUJACK or like this deck, can really put a stop to what Sin is trying to do. And so that's why we've got 3 of this card in here, basically. It's also just a nice card to have. When you get to that simplified game state and you have maybe 2 or 3 cards in hand, you just slam this on a kill swing, and suddenly your opponent can't out-combo because they only have 2 or 3 cards in hand as well. So yeah, really, really strong card for that simplified game state aim. And I do probably want to go back up to 4 as well as the support, but I'm just trying out this next card. The main downside to this card is against Gogeta, it is really, really bad into their 8-drop, because it just becomes a useless 5k. So you try, and most of the time defending against their early 4-drops, you don't go below 5 cards in hand, because the deck is very strong, very, very good at maintaining a hand size. And then the last 2 cards in the deck are 2 Super Kamehameha. This could easily just go to the side deck and add in the extra ratios of the cards I've just talked about, but I feel like it's very nice against green decks that might be running the Bupo, against red decks that might be running Topo. Against Gamma, it's going to come up because you want to be counterplaying their Android 14. There's just a lot of floodgates that you want to hit, Riposte as well, Heroic Prospects. So I feel like this card is kind of necessary to run. In a best of 1 pre-side, you could definitely just stick it in the side and run those extra copies of the other ratios. But it feels like you at least need this in some form nowadays. And that is the full 50 cards list. Even though I get close to decking out sometimes, I still think that you run 50 cards. I just want that maximum consistency. You don't want to be running non-black cards in the deck because it will slow down your leader awaken. If you run Champa or anything and you hit it off of your first 6 warps, then you're just kind of screwed for a lot of the game, because awakening turn 2 in this deck is massive, because it means you can get your free combos and you can actually start playing stuff from the warp, which is where your main threats are going to be coming from. So I think it's really important to just keep the deck all black. And yeah, I don't feel like you run the risk of decking out that often, because after the first 6 cards that you warp, a lot of the cards that you're then going to be warping are going to be from hand. You're going to opt not to warp the top card of your deck a lot of the time, because you'll just draw the cards that you want in the warp, and then you'll be warping them from hand for your leader auto on swing, for your activate battle skills to play from warp. So you really don't need to go above 50, I don't think. And consistency is just key. Then for the Z deck, which I haven't got to say before, we are running one of the Z leader. So this Z leader doesn't drop off at all, because or it doesn't drop off at all, so which is why we're only running the 1 copy, because we only need 1. It's a Z Awaken for 3 Z energy. It's a 20k double striker. Z Awakens for 1 black if your life is at 2 or less over a Shroom Salsa leader. And then it's got an activate battle where you can combo with 2 non-super combo Demon Realm Race Demon Gods from Warp. So In theory, you could go up to 40k on leader with 2 10ks or a 10k and the salsa that becomes a 6k. You could go to 36. And there are times where you just do that and you out-combo a swing for free. You can almost out-combo secret rare swings with just this guy alone, which is insane. And there are lots of times where I'll just leave an energy up during my opponent's turn and let them hit me down to 2 so that I can Z Awaken on their turn, which I found has been much more effective than Z Awakening on my turn. And then it lets me make use of both the free combos on this guy and this guy. And then the 20k just kind of carries me to defend for my next turn, and then next turn I can make use of the activate main, which is once per turn you can drop off a Z energy from your Z energy to the drop, and then you check the bottom card of your deck, and if it's a 3-drop Shroom or Salsa with Servant, you play it, and if not, it goes back to the bottom of the deck. So that is just kind of how you start to put the pressure on and start killing people. Again, with these simplified game states, I'm just going to keep reinforcing this idea because it's so important. Like you bottom deck a Salsa during your opponent's turn with a super combo. You Z Awaken during your opponent's turn, you do all the free combo, just stop all their attacks. You go to your turn, activate main, play Salsa from the bottom of the deck. I've just got a free 20k body and you've warped a card from hand. Come the simplified game states, that's going to be what wins you the game. So those are the plays that you really aim to get towards, and if you can comfortably survive on your Z leader for more than a turn, you've probably won the game. The issue with this deck comes with the fact that you have to Z Awaken on 2 life, and so if you are living, if you're Z Awakening on 2 life, most of the time you have to kill them that turn because they're just going to kill you otherwise. It's really about getting to that point where you can survive comfortably on 2 life. And then for the rest of the Z deck, it's black. There's only 2 other cards that we can run. We've got 4 Demigra because it doesn't have it does have unique, but people will actually want to kill it. And then we have 2 Vegeta because it has unique and people just won't kill it. Pretty simple stuff. Demigra, it costs 2, costs 3 Z energy, which is perfect for your overrounds, like I've already said. And then it has an auto once per turn. If it's your turn and you play a battle card from your Warp or Overrealm or Dark Overrealm, you draw a card and then warp a battle card that costs 6 or less. Really frustrating part about this card is that it's only during your turn. So if you do what I've said before and you hold some energy up for your opponent's turn and play some guys out from your Warp and they still haven't killed this guy, you don't get the effect, which is... I don't really know why that clause is on the card, because it's really, really bad for the deck. It would make the card so much better for the deck if you could trigger it during your opponent's turn. But it is what it is. This card doesn't really come up all that often, other than if you're about to Overrealm 3 and you need more cards in drop, or even if you're about to Overrealm 6. It just comes up as a nice, I'm going to fill my drop up where I couldn't normally because of the leader's permanent. And then also I get a draw and I get some more removal. And this is definitely one of the better removal options for the deck, other than the Dark Broly Overrealm. So this combined with the Dark Broly Overrealm becomes very, very strong for the deck, because otherwise you lack a lot of removal. And then the 2 Vegeta, very simple, helps you self-awaken, which you don't really need in this deck, but it can help you go from 6 to 5, which is relevant for your token negates, and it can also help you go from 3 to 2, which can come up for your Z-Awaken. Although most of the time I just let people hit me down to 2 and then try and survive that turn as well. That's pretty much it for the Z deck. The other thing to note about the Z leader, which I didn't mention before, is that because it goes over your leader, you're then going to be able to get rid of the leader permanent, which is really massive because it means you can actually start overwhelming every turn, which is obviously massive for then just cycling the cards that you've comboed with back into your Warp so that you can play them all again, which again, that simplified game state, it just free value. That's what this deck is all about, is free value from Warp. That's pretty much the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope that I was able to give a good showing of what the deck wants to do and a good explanation of the aims of the deck. And hopefully it was good enough for you guys to try this deck out as well. I do actually have a couple of gameplays on the channel, and I will be definitely playing this deck more on stream because I absolutely love it. It's super fun. So if that's something you guys are interested in, obviously you can follow my Twitch, twitch.tv/BigONotation245. Or if you just want to go and watch stuff now of this deck in action, then I'll have a link in the description to the gameplay video wherever it is on my channel, and you guys can just go ahead and watch that. So I'll sort that all out for you, of course. But other than that, that's going to be it from me today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed and you're going to try this deck out, because oh my god, is it so much fun. You probably won't expect it, but yeah, it's a really fun deck. I highly recommend it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one.